So our next guest, I'm very excited for this. He written the best wrestling-related book of the year. It's called NITRO, The Inevitable Rise and Inevitable Collapse, The Incredible Rise and Inevitable Collapse of Ted Turner's WCW. There are so many words, and I will ask him why there are that many words.
Did I get it right at the beginning? Did I get it?
I think you did. You get it, yes.
I win.
It's a fantastic book on the history of WCW Nitro. Please welcome our guest, Guy Evans. So again, I guess that's the first question. Why so many words in the title?
Before we get to that, I just want to say Rugged Randy, officially my favorite character of all time. How many of you guys are with me on that one?
Yeah!
Rugged Randy. To hell with the interview, I want to see more of Rugged Randy. But,
we might just be able to make
there might be more to come.
A little teaser for later. Why so many words in the subtitle of the book, other than trying to trip you up? I think I was trying to allude at something which I think is a consistent theme throughout this book. I'm not sure how many of you guys have read it yet. If you haven't, please do so soon. But the fact that the word inevitable is in the title there, only once, not twice. But I think once you read this book, you'll see very clearly why WCW's fall was inevitable. Some things were within their control, other things they didn't quite have a lot of control over, but that's really the reason for such a wordy title.
And despite the long name, if you just Google Nitro book or Guy Evans Nitro book, Amazon link's right there.
There you go. So again, if you haven't read it so far, please go on Amazon, WCW Nitro book. We also have a website as well. I'm just going to get to my plugs now.
Yeah, start
WCWNitrobook.com. While we're on the subject, you can check it out there.
Now, how did this sort of start for you? Because you're not a wrestling writer going way back,
Right.
and you came to this, and this sort of became a passion project for you. But what sort of brought this on for you?
Well, it was a phone call from Rugged Randy one day. They've got this idea for a book, and I think you should write it. Honestly, like I'm sure a lot of people here, wrestling was a big part of my childhood and growing up, and I was a fan of both WCW and the WWF, even though, obviously I grew up in the UK, not from around these parts.
You mean the UUWF?
That's exactly right, yes. Sometimes I tell people I'm from the UK and they say, oh, the Ukraine. I say, no, the UK. I once went to the post office to send a package home, and I told them it's going to the UK, and they did actually write the Ukraine, but that's a different story. But I grew up a big fan of wrestling, and I'm sure many people can attest to this here. You get to a certain stage sometimes where you kind of just grow out of it. And when WCW went away, that was certainly the case for me. I just kind of moved on to some other things, but it was always in the back of my mind. I was always really intrigued by this whole time frame, the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. I think just a fascinating time, not just in wrestling, but in pop culture in general, and just the media landscape at the time so different to today. So I always really wanted someone to write the story from the perspective of WCW as more of a business entity and how it sort of functioned within pop culture. And I will just say, I'm sure people are sort of wondering to themselves, well, what about the other books that have been written on WCW? And I think all of them are tremendously informative, and I find them all to be very entertaining, very useful. But I think once you read this book, you'll see that it takes, I'll just say, a very different sort of approach to the story.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about interesting times for wrestling, but also interesting times in the Turner business world. A whole bunch of things happen sort of behind the scenes, way above the level of wrestling that you go into quite a bit. You interview a number of Turner executives, some of which had some interesting perspectives on wrestling.
No, absolutely. And some people here are probably wondering, well, what does this guy with the funny accent know about WCW? He wasn't there, he didn't work there, he's never been in wrestling, and you're absolutely right. And that was really something I was cognizant of writing the book is, who cares what I think, who cares what my opinions are? Let me go to the source, let me speak to the people who are actually there, and then sort of create the story from there. And as you kind of alluded to there, when I started talking to some of these Turner executives, and some people who worked on the television side, there were some people who picked up the phone and they said, oh, this is awesome, WCW, I remember that, it was such a big thing back in the day, love to give you an hour or an hour and a half to talk about it. There are some other people who did not have that. I remember this one guy in particular who's not quoted in the book for obvious reasons. You'll see why in a second. He went on a diatribe when I called him up, because remember, I went into this with no contacts, no prior relationships. I'm just cold calling people and saying, hey, I'm writing this book. The book is going to get written whether or not you're a part of it, but I'd like to have you as a part of it. But this one executive picked up the phone and he said, look, I hated wrestling then, I hate wrestling now, I didn't care about it, nobody cared about it. You know, we didn't sit around and talk about Diamond Dallas Page or Kevin Nash or Scott Hall or the NWO or Hulk Hogan or Eric Bischoff or Conan or Eddie Guerrero.
What else is there to talk about?
Psychosis. And I'm like, he's listing half the roster to me right now. And I said, oh, so you didn't follow it? He said, no, I couldn't even tell you the start of it.
I thought he was just a big Buck Bagwell fan.
Well, there you go.
I don't even remember which month it was in 1997 that Prince Iaukea won the television title.
Exactly.
It was April or March. I can't recall.
Right.
Who cares?
That was what it was like. And I'm holding back laughter on the other end because I'm thinking this is a joke. You know, he's about to say, oh, I'm only kidding, I'd love to talk about it. But that was his true feeling. So I think maybe he was a closet fan. I think safe to say.
Well, there's interesting. I mean, there's a perspective. There's one quote you have from someone who did speak on the record where he says that wrestling was not part of the TNT brand in the end because it didn't touch the hearts and minds of a viewer. And I was like, no! I disagree, sir! But so it is interesting, though, to get that perspective, because those were the people who, in the end, were making the decisions about WCW.
It wasn't as touching as Witchblade.
That's right. Well, you know, it's interesting because, again, this kind of touches on the title of the book, I suppose, and one of the main themes of the book is what happened with WCW in the end. Quite frankly, the decision was made by people who had never watched a minute of the programming, or people who maybe watched a little bit of the programming but were not enamored by it and didn't feel comfortable with it being on their networks. And I think, you know, that stigma, it's safe to say, has probably eroded somewhat since 2001, which is when WCW, of course, was sold. But I think some of that still exists, obviously, across society. But what's really interesting is in doing the book, you talk to so many people across so many cross-sections of life who are big fans of wrestling. I mean, it really does, as you said, it does touch the heart and minds of so many people, but they just couldn't appreciate it.
Yeah, you talk to the people who were, obviously, again, these executives, but you also talk to the people who were intimately involved in producing the show. Someone like Neil Pruitt, who you now have a producer for WCW, who you now have a podcast with. It's just a terrific Secrets of Nitro podcast. He has an incredible recall, you said, for some of these details.
Yeah, so you guys may not know the name Neil Pruitt, but you certainly know the voice of the NWO, the following announcement guy. That's Neil Pruitt. He was one of the producers of WCW back in the day. And when I first got to talking with him, he was pretty reluctant. He was kind of like, not really sure about this, you know, maybe send me an email, give me a full pitch and I'll get back to you type of thing. Well, eventually he became a huge help in putting together the book, and he would leave me these voicemails on his way home from work where he'd say, hey guy, I just remember I was just thinking about the time we went to Alcatraz with Roddy Piper. And he would leave me a 5-minute message talking about, yeah, I remember, you know, Roddy was on the boat and he nearly fell in, and I would listen to it saying, oh, what? He nearly fell in? Like, I need to get some more information on this. But what was really incredible about him is, like you said, his recall was just amazing. Like, there was one, actually it was the Alcatraz promo that I was asking him about. And we're really getting into the minutiae here, so I'm not sure if you guys remember exactly this. But there's a part of that scene where I think Piper comes out of the cell, and there's this like really weird sound effect when again, we're going really into the weeds here, but this really weird sound effect when they open up the cell. And I was just randomly talking to him about that, and he said, yeah, we used 47 different sound effects to create that noise, and he told me the program that they used, and I'm just like, thinking to myself, this happened in 1997, and this guy, you know, it's amazing when you really go into a world like this and you start talking to people who, obviously this was a big part of their life, it's amazing what they remember, and that's probably the biggest thing that I learned doing this book.
Yeah, Neil's incredible. He's been on our podcast, The Best Ever Was, and he tells, again, some amazing stories about those times.
As has God.
As has God, yeah, you can go check out more. I will say that you had, obviously the most important person involved in Nitro was, of course, Eric Bischoff, who is quoted in the book and now has a podcast. And initially, it seems maybe he'd forgotten that he'd been interviewed because he said, who is this guy Evans and who is he to write this book? But you did apparently have a chance to get his opinion on it.
Yeah, I will say, I'm not sure if I heard that particular episode, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but I think on the whole, it's been amazing listening to his podcast, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard it. He's really praised the book sort of week after week, which is really commendable in a way, because if you read this thing, you'll see that there are some things that don't necessarily portray him in that good of a light. And about 6 weeks ago, when we first met in Chicago for this StarCast event, I actually had the chance to meet him. I was actually doing an interview with someone on camera, and I was talking about something or other, probably 47 sound effects, or UK sounds like the Ukraine, or some nonsense like that. And I'm talking to the person on the camera, and I'm going on and on, and I turn to my right, hey, there's Eric Bischoff. Anyway, and then I said, that's Eric Bischoff. And he just happened to be watching me do this interview, and I spent a few minutes speaking with him, and he was just very, very complimentary, and he said, you really nailed it with this book. There were some things that were hard to read about myself, but it's what happened. It's factual. And again, I think, regardless of what you think about anyone who's quoted in the book, that is a pretty commendable thing, because if you think about if someone wrote a book about you, or heavily focused on you, and there were some anecdotes and some stories in there that didn't reflect too well on you, just speaking generally now, would you or would we in that situation feel the same way? So the fact that he's been able to put that to the side and still praise the book, I think is really amazing.
Yeah, it's very much worthy of praise. It's an incredible 600-page read. The NITRO, The Incredible Rise and Inevitable Collapse of Ted Turner's WCW. Guy Everins, everyone. Woo!